Alright, hello folks, part 3 of this lab. I'd like to go over how to dimension some circular features and some circular hole patterns, so circular replicate. There are a couple tricks to this. So I have a part here, we're calling it a base plate. Basically it's a thin plate with holes that are on a circle, right? So these are 6 holes that are evenly spaced around a circle. And then we've got this extruded piece here that has a blind hole so it doesn't come through to the other side. So that's our part. It's in the English units. So now let's go ahead and make a drawing. Again, I'm making sure that I am loading up the UD template here. There it is. And I'm going to go ahead and pull in some views. Again, the way that I drew this part, my top view is actually what I want as my front view. It'll make the most sense. And I'm not actually going to create 3 views here. Usually with circular parts, this other view is super redundant, so I'm going to just kind of let that be. I am going to have an isometric. I'll go ahead and pull that up. And I'm going to kind of move things around a little bit, give myself a little bit of space. I am okay with you guys in these types of instances where you don't have a third view, pulling this isometric down a little bit to give yourself a little bit more space. Again, we're shooting for clarity. So if you don't have that third view, it does not need to be at a perfect 45-degree angle. I'm okay with that. All right, so let's fix a couple things about this. First, I'd like to turn on the hidden lines, make sure those are showing up in the views. I'm going to get rid of them on my isometric, but I definitely needed them over here. I also want to note, again, that my scale, so what it pulled up on the sheet was half scale, so basically this is half the size on paper that it is in reality, and that's totally fine. So I would just make sure that my scale says 1 to 2 here when I go and edit my template here. Okay, so that's what I want to fix there. I need to fix my isometric again, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I want to add in center lines, so I'm going to select the view there, and it went ahead and added those in, and that's great. I am not happy with how this all showed up over here. So what I'd like to see is similar to what we've looked at in class, is that these center marks here are on what we call a bolt circle, right? So basically, the way that this would be made, right, is that you would, and it's easiest to specify on a drawing, is if these holes are laid out on a circle with an even spacing, right? So I'm going to delete all the center marks that were put on there automatically, and I'm going to put on my own center marks. And this is going to get us into some of the more advanced options of center marks. So we're going to click on center mark. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple things here. So first, you'll notice we've been using center marks sort of as the default, like, hey, I want to lay down a center mark. That's fine, right? Like I would do for here. I just got an X and Y that I'm trying to locate. But this guy here, we don't necessarily want to locate on X and Y. We want to locate radially. So I'm going to go back and delete this guy. I'm going to leave this one in as is, but I'm going to go back to center mark. And I'm going to select this guy here, which is going to allow me to go from hole to hole to hole, and eventually it should pick up that this is all on a circle, and lay down center marks that make sense around that circle. So it's added in this this bolt circle, and that is great. That is what I wanted. I also want to tidy up these lines a little bit. So I'm super particular, due to some level of drafting knowledge in my formative years, about how these lines look. So I don't like big, long center lines here. I want them nice and tidy and not cluttering up the rest of my drawing. So, okay, so I'm happier with this. It's very clear where my center lines are and are not. I might go ahead and actually extend this guy just a little bit. I'm going back and futzing here. I'm futzing. But I want to make it absolutely clear that these 2 circles are concentric. Okay. So I've got a couple things here. Let me go ahead and complete the drawing. Let me start with this outer circle here. So I'm going to use my Smart Dimension. I'm going to deal with the big features here. So this is diameter 5 inches. I like that. I like the way that it looks, okay? Notice that my diameter symbol is coming up. That was a problem I think that you guys won't face. You saw in part 2 I was struggling with that. This is actually due to the fact that I just switched over to SolidWorks 2018 and it was trying to read the symbols file from my prior SolidWorks version. So you guys should not have that problem. If you do, immediately call a TA over and we'll see what we can do about that. But that problem of getting these symbols should not occur for you. Okay, so we've got our outer one, and now let me do my, this one here I'd also consider to be a major feature. So I'm going to do this guy, okay, and they're concentric. I'm going to do now my thicknesses here, right? I'll go ahead and dimension those. And the place to do that would be off of this. And I'd probably do it as additive here because really probably the way that this would be made is either two parts that are welded together or I would lathe down these thicknesses. So let's see if I can make this a little bit more tidy. I think I'm going to move my 0.75 inside. I don't like how that's looking. There we go. That'll work. Okay. Okay, now we've got this hole to deal with, and this is what we call a blind hole, right? So this hole is going to go down to only a certain depth. It's not going to go all the way through the part. So there are a couple ways to dimension this. So I'm going to dimension first just with the Smart Dimension tool and edit. So if I were to do this, maybe I'll come up here. Once you have radial parts, there's a lot of clutter, so don't be afraid to kind of pull these off in different directions. Okay, so it's a 0.5 diameter, but I need to give some more information, right? I would prefer not to specify the depth of this hole off of the top drawing because that would come off of a hidden line. So I would use the depth symbol here, depth, and then I'm coming down 0.5. Okay, so that's one way to put this in, is to add on to the auto dimension that's happening. The other would be there is something called a hole call-out feature that tries to take a guess, your best guess at what's happening with a particular hole. So if I do hole call-out, you sometimes have to edit this, sometimes it is not what you want, but 0.5 to depth 0.5. Okay, so that's just this hole call-out feature, and that's good. Okay, so in that case, it's perfectly correct. All right, so we've done sort of the outer parts, we've done this hole, now we just have to deal with these guys. Okay, so there are a couple ways to do this. I am going to do it with a single Smart Dimension coming off of this and editing. So now I'm going to say 6x evenly spaced, all caps, evenly spaced. And my bolt circle, I believe, is, I gotta actually check that, so I'm going to go back and go ahead and remind myself what my bolt circle was here. That is a radius of 1.5, which would be a diameter of 3, and I'd probably specify that as a diameter. Okay, so I come in here, 6x, evenly spaced. I might move my 6x up. Leave evenly spaced on that line. And I now want to say diameter 1.50 bolt circle. IRCLE. Okay. So this is one way to note it. All right, that would be the preferred way to call it out for the shop. Okay, so now I'd like to show off one other little feature here. So note that our dimensions are getting a little cluttered, so I'm going to go back and kind of fix those a little bit. I want to show you guys just that that Smart Dimension can do angular measurements. And I wouldn't include this on the drawing because the evenly spaced takes care of 6 holes around a 360-degree circle, right? So you're going to have 60 degrees in between. So I would just like to show you that these 2 holes are 60 degrees apart on that circle and how to do that on Smart Dimension. So should you need an angular measurement, you are able to do that. Smart Dimension generally picks it up, but if it doesn't, you would need to go to angular running dimension. But let's see if Smart Dimension can, if it'll make me happy here There we go, 60 degrees, okay? So you do have the option here of laying down an angular measurement. All right, that's all that I wanted to show you. That's part 3 of 3.